Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning we would like to look at the subject greater than Melek, Shelomoh. Melek, Shelomoh. And that is greater than Solomon, greater than King Solomon. So I would like for you to join me in the book of Luke. Luke, and we will look at chapter 11, and we will read verse 31, reading on. The sovereigness, that's the queen of the south, shall rise up in the judgment with the men of this generation and shall condemn them. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Shelomoh. And look, a greater than Shelomoh is here. A greater than Solomon is here. Now, it would indeed have been a great moment of insolence, an incident of impudence. If a mere man was to utter the words that he is greater than Solomon. We read in the book of Kings that Solomon was the greatest man that had ever lived. And there was none before him like him, and there was none like him after him. And so this morning, we come to read here in the book of Luke that there is one greater than Solomon. And so my thoughts are driven back to that period we call the Enlightenment. That time from the Middle Age to modernity. I'm referring to the Renaissance period, which evinced an audacious interest in insolence, the effrontery of which smugly grinned at divine utterances. That's the period when the word of Yah, the scriptures, the Bible was burned in the streets in France. That's the period that my mind is driven back this morning. It was a time of reason, human reasoning. It became the currency of intellectual transactions and the hub of social snobbery. When men dabbled in the exuberance of pride, it was that time that I'm referring to. The theme is forever prevalent among us today in moral and religious literature, and indeed in the contemporary society in which we live. That kind of intellectual snobbery, it's here. But even in that age, when men were intellectually boisterous, even then, it could never have been said there is one who is greater than Solomon. It could never have been said. And so this morning, we're at that stage when we have to contend with he who have spoken that is greater than Solomon. And one of the things that I see here is quite pertinent for us to look at. Because let's first look at it from a grammatical perspective. We see the intent here of Dr. Luke is to do a comparative analysis rather than looking at it through another perspective. What do I mean? Look at it this way. We know that from the perspective of grammar, when you're dealing with an adjective and you're doing so through inflection and you're doing a comparative analysis, you had ER. If you're doing a superlative analysis, you add EST. So the writer here, he knows that Yeshua is greater than Noah. He knows that he's greater than David. He knows that he's greater than Job, than Jonah, than Moses. In fact, the woman at the well did ask him, are you greater than our father Jacob? He's greater than. But the writer here this morning is not doing a superlative analysis. So he doesn't put ES, because in that context, he would have put he is the greatest. But he says he's the greater. He is greater. So he's doing a comparative analysis. The analysis is the juxtaposition here is that comparing him with the wisest man who has ever lived. So he's saying, so the superlative of great is greater. And that's what our subject is this morning. One who is greater than Solomon. And so we want to approach this because the point that he wants us to look at, he says the queen of the south came, she heard the rumors that there was this man, this king in Jerusalem who was great, he was wise. And it intrigues me greatly that this queen picked up herself from wherever she was, and the scholars vary. Some say the queen of the south is in Yemen, and some say it is in Ethiopia. And so it varies, and it points us to the question that was asked this morning in Sabbath school. Because when I read the historian Josephus, the Hebrew historian, might I add, he said the queen that came to see Solomon, she was from Ethiopia. That's what Josephus says, and he lived in the 1st century. And then I read Origen, this North African scholar and the theologian, and he too concluded, in fact, he said a little bit more. He said that queen that we read of in the Song of Songs, that woman that Solomon fell in love with, that was the Queen of Sheba. And so what made it concretize for me in my mind is that when I read the historical nature of Yemen and Ethiopia, both Shemitic people, because they're descendants of Shem, I came to understand that at the time that this happened, both Yemen and Ethiopia was ruled by one dynasty. It was the same people. And so what we're really asking and trying to answer is where and what is Ethiopia? Will Ethiopia include Sudan also? The Queen of the South. So Ethiopia is not just this little piece of land we call Ethiopia today. Biblical Ethiopia includes Sudan, and from what we're seeing here, even Yemen at one time. This is in part of Arabia. And so the point here, this queen, she heard the rumors. And she decided, I must meet this man. And Yeshua wants to make the point, he made the point, that this queen traveled from Ethiopia to Jerusalem to listen to a mere man. And I am greater than this man, and the people are rejecting me. Now, let's look at the queen, because she was no ordinary queen. So turn with me to the book of Melek, Melekh, Aleph, chapter 10. And the sovereigness of Sheba heard of the report of Shelomoh concerning the name of Yahweh, and came to try him with hard question. Did you hear that? She heard rumors. She heard that there was this wise man, and she left where she was. Now you got to understand that this queen would have had a congress of wise men. She would have had a parliament of magi's. She would have had sages, seers at her disposal to give her advice, as it is the custom of monarchs to have. She would have had all that. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why would a queen, not just an ordinary queen, if we believe the history, she is the monarch of Yemen and Ethiopia. And she would leave her house, her palace, her kingdom, her realm, all those wise men, and come to listen to King Solomon. Why? But the point that is being made here, she did all that to listen to a man. But there is one greater than Solomon. He's here. We mustn't miss that. Let's read on. And she came to Jerusalem with very great company, with camels that bore spices, very much gold and precious stones. And she came to Shelomoh, and she spoke with him about all that was in her heart. We've got to understand that this was not a state visit, but her mind was in a state. We see no evidence in the word here where she received an invitation from Solomon. We don't see that. So it was at her own accord and her own volition that she decided to seek after truth, in spite of the fact that she had great wise men at her disposal. What point am I making? I'm saying that sometimes people are so indolent, so lazy that they won't open the word or go to the place where Yah's name is and seek after truth. They just like a convenient religion. This woman traveled great distances to hear truth. And so Yeshua, it took his attention and said, this woman will rise up when? This generation right now, because we're talking about a tic-tac generation. We're talking about a Facebook generation. We're talking about a WhatsApp generation. We spend more time on our phones and we won't even open the book. This woman is going to condemn you because she sought after truth and you won't even open the mouth. You won't even open your mouth. You won't even open the word of Yah. She's going to condemn you. And where did she come from? Oh, she's your ancestor. Did you not know that? She is your ancestor. That's how your ancestors behave prior to this age. That's how they behave. They sought after truth. But you? Oh, you prefer emojis. That's the language you speak. We no longer have sentence to sentence conversation anymore because you have become what? Sound bite generation. You just send emoji. Oh yes, this woman is going to condemn you. And notice something. It says that she did not come empty-handed. She came with a great train. And she came and she brought gifts to the king. I suppose my question is, what do you give to the man who has everything? What do you give? When you visit someone like Solomon, what do you bring him? You know he has everything. Wisdom, you cannot teach him anything. Wealth, the word says he made silver like stones in Jerusalem. Gold, he has it. We won't talk about wives because he had 700. And concubines, he had 300. Education, he was above everybody else. He was the superlative king. His name means peace, by the way. And throughout his reign, he had peace. Are you with me? But let's read on. And Solomon answered all the questions. There was no matter hidden for the sovereign that he did not make known to her. And the sovereign, the queen of Sheba, saw all the wisdom of Shelomoh. Did you hear me? Listen to what the word said. It says she saw his wisdom. That means Solomon made wisdom a verb. It manifested itself. She saw it. She did not only hear it through word, she saw it, and she begins to tell you how she saw it. It says that, and the sovereign of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Shelomoh and the whole house that he had built, and the food on his table. Did you hear me? Solomon knew what food was, because he knew the types of food that Yah said you shouldn't eat and the types of food that you should eat. He knew that. And she watched all that. For her, it was a Kodak moment. She took a photograph with her mind as she watched the king in action. That's what was happening with the queen. And the seat of his servants, and the service of his waiters. She saw how the people respected him and conducted themselves around. She was in awe of Solomon, his attire, his cupbearers, and his ascending offering, which he offered in the house. Did you hear me? His gift to Yah, because he knew that everything that Yah gave him, he couldn't give back, but he gave his wealth. He gave his time. Sometimes I hear people say, well, I don't have any time to do the work of Yah. This ought to be your priority. Can you think of anything greater than serving Yah? I can't. History has made no mention of it, if there is something greater, because there is one here who is greater than Solomon. And the woman from your ancestral home, Ethiopia, has come to see him, but there is one now greater than him. And you are wasting time and resources. Of course, you spend your money on Louis and all kind of Italian stuff, not knocking it, just describing it. And some will not even buy themselves a good Bible. Are you with me? Can you not see how this Ethiopian woman is going to condemn you, or is condemning you by her very presence? And her name that is mentioned in the word is a rebuke, a constant rebuke to this generation. Can you not see it? Oh, yes. Then she said to the sovereign, the word I heard in my own land about your words and your wisdom are true. But I did not believe the words until I came and saw with my own eyes. She said it was incredulous. But now I believe it, and off the secret, off the things that I heard or that I see was not told to me. Now I see it. Blessed are you, or your men, and blessed are these your servants who stand continually before you, who are hearing your wisdom. The word says, when she saw the way he did things, and when she saw his ascending offering, which he offered in the house, you know that this was not just an hour visit. She watched how he ate. She watched the servants who served him. This woman was meticulous. She was pedantic in note-taking. She saw the food on his table, and she watched that. She saw the way he conducted himself in the house of Yah. She saw all that. And all this could not have been done on one day. And when she looked at him, she said, blessed are you among men. But Yeshua says, one is here greater than this man. That ought to get our attention, should it not? Greater than this man. So we are at the end of the age. And it is a time characterized by an effort to revive and perhaps to surpass ideas and the achievements of classical antiquity. We could see that feeling. We could see the way people are thinking. Hear me? I'm seeing their thinking, because their thinking is being manifested in their works. Even as the Queen of Sheba said, I saw his wisdom. That's what's happening. We know they were great men in the time of Abraham, in the time of Nimrod. The Bible calls him the great hunter. But this morning we're looking at the superlative of great, which is greater. This man is greater than Solomon. There was no need to look at the superlative analysis. Why? Because Solomon was greater than all of them. So the comparison is between Yeshua and Solomon. So he said he is greater than Solomon. So we're doing the comparative analysis this morning. And so because of that, it is a time for cogitation, is it not? It is a time for rumination. It is a time for reflexivity. It is a time to think. It is that kind of time. Because I see people around me, men and women wearing the inscriptions of Nimrod and of Jezebel, pretending to be wise. But the word says, this woman, this Queen of Sheba, this Ethiopian woman, who can trace her land all the way to the Garden of Eden, because that river encircles the land in which she was born. She's going to condemn us. Why? Because she had that desire. She had that urge, that urgency to seek after wisdom. But we won't even go to the local church down the road to hear truth. We won't even tune into prayer meeting. We won't even open the word of Yah and read each day. We won't even pray. So the queen is going to condemn us, and rightly so. So we're seeing that the queen was an earnest inquirer. Her desire to know truth is a constant rebuke to the tic-tac generation, the soundbite generation, the Twitter generation. People relish the fact that their pictures are on the Facebook, but they do not concern themselves whether their names are inscribed in the Lamb's Book of Life. They're not concerned of that. They just want to look cute on Facebook. Oh, yes. And so this morning, we have to ask ourselves some searching questions. So join me in the book of Aleph. That's the book of Ecclesiastes, and we're going to do a few verses in chapter 1. The words of Aleph, son of David, son of Jerusalem, futility, futility, says Aleph. Futility, futility, all is futile. This is the same man, Solomon, the teacher. He's here saying everything is futile. What does man gain from all his labor in which he toils upon the sun? A generation passes away and a generation comes, but the earth stands forever. The sun also rises and the sun sets and hurries back to the place where it arose, going to the south and turning round to the north, turning, and on its round the wind returned. Seemingly, Solomon is here saying everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And so my question this morning is, if everything is meaningless, How can I respond to this meaningfully? And if everything is meaningless, did Solomon really say anything? Did he? And so this morning, we need to look at our own selves in a way that perhaps we've never looked at ourselves. Come with me to the book of Mark. Mark chapter 10. And verse 16. And it reads, "He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved." It can't get any simpler than that. That's quite obvious. "But he that believeth not shall be damned." Did you hear that? He that believeth, remember we said believe is a verb. It's not a mental assent. When you believe something, it becomes a verb and it's what you do. It's enacted. But if you don't believe, you are damned. Note that every evil work is already sentenced. He that believeth not, said Yeshua, is condemned already. It means that when you don't believe, a sentence is already passed on you for damnation. The only thing left is the execution of it. We must understand that. So, if this message is presented to you today and you hear the truth of it coming from the word of Yah and you reject it, the word says you are condemned. A sentence is passed over your life. Only thing is left now for the execution of it. But because it doesn't happen straight away, you think you're all right because Yah gives you forbearance. Forbearance still means you have to pay. Look at it this way. You go to the shop and you take out your credit card and you pay for the item that you just purchased. And they tell you you don't have to pay any interest for a month or for a year. There's forbearance. But you still have to pay. The sin you commit, you still have to answer to it because the wages of sin is death. But forbearance is intended for you to come back to Yah. Are you with me? So I want you to, read Deuteronomy with me. Deuteronomy chapter 10. And verse 12, because it's important that we ascertain exactly what Yah requires from us. It says, "And now, Israel, what does Yah, thy Elohim, require of thee? But to fear Yah, thy Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him." Did you hear that? The first thing you do is fear him. Don't tell me you love him, because you don't know him. He says, that which he requires from you, first of all, is to fear him. And after you've feared him, then you walk in his ways, and then you love him. Love comes at the end. That's why he said, if you love me, you keep my commandment and demonstrate the love. So that's what you do. So come with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 8. Because there are people going around who have not believed. And they think it's a good option not to believe. But they don't know that they are already condemned. And A sentence like a pendulum is hanging over their head. And they're just waiting for the execution of Yah's wrath on them. They don't know that. But let me consolidate that point for them so they can see it. Ecclesiastes chapter 8. And we'll begin in verse 11. The word says, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Because when we sin, Yah doesn't strike us down straight away. A sentence is nevertheless passed. Though a sinner do evil 100 times and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with them that fear Yah, which fear before him, but it shall not be well with the wicked. Did you hear me? Neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before Yah. Let me say it another way. Often we read the newspaper, or we hear it on the news, or we hear it through other news. Oh, such and such a person died suddenly. My question is, how do you know it's sudden? Because the word says, the one who does not believe at that point is condemned. But the wrath of God is not executed at that time immediately. He's given forbearance, the intent of which is to bring him back to Yah. But if Yah decides he's not responding to the truth, I'll take him away. To us who look on, it is sudden. But no, the condemnation had taken place long time ago. But it says that he who is wise will fear Yah, because the beginning of wisdom is the fear of Yah first thing. That's why we're studying Solomon, because he was wise. He feared Yah. And so this is why our ancestors, the Queen of the South, went to see this wise man who feared Yah. We've got to understand that. So, through knowledge of and displeasure of the evil, when one sees vile things done on the earth, as we are looking at vile things being done on the earth, and because we don't see any lightning bolt striking people, we think it's all right. But we have to understand his eyes roam through the earth. His eyes reaches further than his will to stretch his arm. He sits as a silent onlooker, and behold, the silence does not indicate his indifference to what we're doing. He doesn't do that. The sentence is pronounced, but the execution is delayed. Don't misunderstand that. The word is preached to you. You know exactly what to do. You know what Yah requires from you, and you continue to put it off. What if you die in your sins? What if Yah decides he wants his breath back that he loaned to you? Where then would you spend eternity? Then you would fall into the category that Solomon spoke about. All that you have done is vanity. Vanity, vanity. Meaningless, meaningless. Your work, your attainment, your college degrees, everything is meaningless if you don't know Yah. I watch people from time to time building huge houses, driving great cars, sending their children to the best Ivy League schools and colleges and universities. And you walk into their home, and it is something to be admired. And you ask me, what's wrong with that? And I would say nothing at all. You have money, get the very best. But then I would ask you, what does it profit you to gain all the world and then lose your soul? Abraham was rich, but he knew Yah. Job was rich, and he knew Yah. David was rich, and he knew Yah. There's nothing wrong with having money. It's when money have you that when you have a problem. The rich young ruler came to him and wanted to know, what shall I do, master, to have eternal life? He said, keep the commandments. He beat his chest and he said, but I've done all these things from my youth. He says, sell all that you have and give it to the poor. And the word said he went away. How? Laughing? Sorrowfully. Because people don't want to part with their money. And we read of a man by the name of Nabal. He was the same. David begged him some ration for a day and for food to eat with his men. And he says, I'm not going to give it to you. And the word says he, some days after he died. Foolishness. And so we're still looking at this woman, our ancestor, the Queen of Sheba. We're looking at her. And it is important that we look at her because she's our kin. And we can still see our people behaving in ways that cause us to ask ourselves, how could you do that? How? How could you do that? How? And so this man, who is greater than David, is greater than Job, is greater than Jacob, is greater than Solomon. At 12 years old, we were told this morning, 12 years old, when other children were playing Nintendos and on their cell phones, texting and tweeting, the word said he was in the temple with lawyers and doctors asking and answering questions. 12. Are you with me? Wow. Now, when I look at that, I say to myself, let's look at it deeper than that. Let's look at it deeper than that. Here was the Creator at 12 years old, looking at his own creation, lawyers and doctors, and asking them questions. He came through the womb of Mary. And he was suckled on the breast of the woman whom he made. Are you with me? He's with his disciples, and there is a storm on the sea. And the disciples cried out, "Master, hearest not that we perish?" And he spoke to the wind, and the wind obeyed him. And the disciples said, "What manner of man is this? It is he who is greater than Solomon. He's here. So why did you go to see Solomon, but you wouldn't come to see him?" You know, it amazes me. People will zoom all over the world looking for information. And the minute you tell them where Yah's name is and where he's being worshipped, as he indicated, they say things like, "Well, my church doesn't believe that. My denomination doesn't teach that." Does the word of Yah teach that? That's what you got to ascertain for yourself. That's what you have to ask. And this man who is so great, we are told that he mingled with harlots. Wow. He mingled with whom? Harlots. And he was eating and drinking with them, yet he's king of all creation. Oh, yes, he is. He mixed with peasants. Foxes did have holes, but he did not have any place to lay his own hand in. Oh, yes. And yet, the paradox is he owns everything. Are you with me? Oh, yes. And so this morning, we are being introduced to this great man. And perhaps you're wondering, why am I telling you all this? Well, come with me to 2 Peter. 2 Peter 1. And let's read verse 12. "Wherefore I will not be negligent to put you always in remembrance of these things, though we know them and be established in the present truth, yea, I think it meet, as long as I am in the tabernacle, this tabernacle, to stir you up by putting you in remembrance." I'm reminding you of these things. That's my duty. Peter says, I will never be negligent of this fact. Though you know some of these things, it is for me, the preacher, the teacher, the elder, to bring the pastor, the priest, the bishop, to bring these things to your attention, to stir you up. Not only to give you knowledge in the head, but so that you will manifest the knowledge and become what? Pragmatic. Oh, yes. That's part of the objective of a teacher, to stir up the student, not just to instruct them, but to remind them of certain things. So the Queen of Sheba, we're told, went and saw this man, Solomon, the wisest man. But there is one today who is greater than Solomon, who is soon to come. And the world is not ready to meet him. And so many are living in a state of condemnation because of their unbeliefs, as the word said. Every time you don't believe or you reject the word, you are condemned, and sentence is passed and is hanging over your head, waiting for the execution. And so, scratch that thought from your mind that such and such a person died, and they died, what? Suddenly. No. You can also scratch the thought from your mind that a person died, and how do they say it? They don't know the cause of death. The coroner says they don't know the cause of death. Have you ever heard that, read that? Oh, they don't know, the cause of death, they don't know. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. That's the cause of all death. Isn't that what the word said? So how is it that the coroner doesn't know? Huh? But the gift of Yah is what? Eternal life. They also say, well, that man died a natural death. Have you heard that? No man has ever died a natural death because death came about as sin. And it's not natural. So, did we not read? Because we take up these cultural languages and we spread them abroad. And when we ask questions, we cannot answer the questions that are asked. So I ask you to come with me to the book of Ayub, that's Job. Chapter 1. The word says there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Ayub, that's Job, and that man was perfect and straight. Hear me? Let me read that again for emphasis. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and straight, and one who feared Elohim. Did you hear me? He was wise because he feared Yah and turned aside from evil. Often you hear people say, well, we can't be what? We can't be perfect. It says Job was perfect. And in Matthew 5:48, what it says, be ye what? Perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So how come the church teaches that you can't be perfect? And so perhaps we've got to define what perfection is. What then is perfection? We want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. But I think Job already knew what perfection is, in the sense that, let's put it this way, you plant an ear of corn. And you plant that ear of corn today. And in planting that ear of corn, that corn is destined to be 15 feet tall. But tomorrow or the week after, you go outside, would it be reasonable to look for corn? No. 2 weeks after, is that ear of corn perfect? You are prone to say it isn't. I would say it is. It's growing. The first thing that the seed did, it died. That's what baptism is. And then it started to grow. So perfection is living to the light that has been you have received. Whatever light that you have received through the word of Yah, if you are living to that light, you're perfect before Yah. Some know more and some know less. The more you know is the more that is expected from you. Much is expected from those who have much. We've got to understand that. You never reach a plateau where you say, all right, I am there. I have grown enough. I am now perfect. No, it is in degrees. In degree. So Job was perfect to the light that he had. We read the biographies of these men, don't we? But most of these men, they only had the Torah, the Old Testament. We have the Old and the New Testament. We have more knowledge than they did in regards to the published word. So more is expected from us. Did he not say knowledge would increase? He said that. But man would destroy his own self with the knowledge. Because my people are destroyed. You know, watch the irony. Watch the paradox. Knowledge is increased, but my people are destroyed for what? Lack of knowledge. How do you reconcile that? You have a generation of people that have more information than any other generation that has passed before. But they are dying through lack of knowledge. Why? They go to the wrong king. They go to the wrong king. The Queen of Sheba said, I have wise men in my realm. I have seers. I have magi's. But I hear of a king in Jerusalem. His name is Shelomoh. His name is peace. I got to see him. And she saddled up. Remember, a journey like that would take months. She didn't fly over on 747. No. She traveled with camels. It was a tedious journey, but she's letting you know truth is important. Did I say important? I mean essential. I mean essential. So you gotta leave the important things in life and do the essential things first. And that which pertains to salvation is essential. So you lie in bed at night with your cell phone and you would browse all over the world and you would tweet everybody you know and you would text almost everyone, but you never find the time to find a text in the book. So you are like those men and women back there in the time of the Renaissance, when they relied on their intellect, their reasoning, and they burned the scriptures in the street. That's France. And we call that the period of the Enlightenment, which was the darkest period. I don't get it. And so I see that attitude. I see that kind of thinking. I see that kind of behavior being revived, even in our time, where people come to church with their phones, but no Bibles. They hear the truth week after week. They go home, but there's no change in their attitudes or behavior. So this wise man, Job, we just read him, that he was wise because he feared Yah. Come with me now to chapter 38. Chapter 38. Then Yahweh answered Job out of the whirlwind and said to him, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Now gird up your loins like a man, and I ask you, and you answer me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth, declared, if you have understanding? Job, we're told, is wise because he feared Yah. We're told he's perfect. We know he's rich. He wasn't in want of anything. So he's a great man, the greatest man in the East. But here he is now, and we're doing a comparative analysis now with Job. We've done one with Solomon. He's saying, you're a wise man, but answer me these questions. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of Elohim shouted for joy, or who enclosed the sea with doors when it burst forth and came from the womb? Who, Job, who made this, and who told the waves that they can't go any further than they are supposed to go? Who did this, Job? You're wise. Mr. Scientist, you who work for NASA, where were you when I put the stars in the sky? You are stargazing now, and you have all those implements and equipments, and you're looking up. Where were you when I put them in the sky? Where were you when I told the sun that, you should move from east to west every day and climb over the horizon and come back the next day? Where did the sun go, Mr. Scientist? Where did it go? Job said, I was speechless. They tell us that the earth spins at 1,000 miles an hour. I read in the word here, and it says it doesn't move. Are you with me? They tell us that the earth revolves around the sun. Isn't that what they tell you in school? And before you're even too old, they give you a globe. And they teach you in school that Australia is underneath. Hear me? That's what they teach you. And I said it was time for cognition, right? For reflection, isn't it? And I asked myself, if I were to get a cup of water, a bowl of water, and swirl it around, what would happen? I'm sure to spill some of it. And I think that we have on the earth more water than we have earth. And it is spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. No spills? No spills? They tell me that, I'm saying, all right, I'm not going too far with you because you're trying to tell me things that I find incredulous. You tell me now that the earth revolves around the sun. Every time I look up, I see the sun above me. Isn't that right? So the earth that is down here is revolving, you tell me, around the sun. Okay? I have one question. In Joshua chapter 10, Joshua is fighting. And Joshua wants to win the war that he's fighting. You see, I'm still dealing with the subject of one who is greater than Solomon. Joshua is fighting, and you know what? Let's go there. Because you may just say, I said. And if I am only saying because I said it, then I'm not saying it. The word says that when Joshua was fighting, he was running out of time. And he wanted more time. And he asked, what did he ask? Huh? Let's read. The word says, let's read chapter 10, and let's read from verse 6. And the men of Gibeon sent to Joshua at the camp of Gilgal, saying, do not withdraw your end from your servant. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us. For all the sovereigns of the Amorites who dwell in the mountains have assembled with us. And Yehoshua, that's Joshua, went up from Gilgal, he and all the soldiers with him, and all of the mighty brave men. And so we're told that he was fighting, and these men wanted to make a what? Peace with him. They feared him. Verse 11, and it came to be as they fled before Israel and were at the descent of Beth-oron, that Yahweh threw down a large hailstone in the heavens on them as far as Azekah, and they died, and there were what? More who died from the hailstones than those whom the sons of Israel had killed with the sword. Then, verse 12, Joshua spoke to Yahweh in the day when Yahweh gave the Amorites over to the children of Israel. And he said before the eyes of Israel, son. What did Joshua say? Son. And you can spell that S-U-N or S-O-N if you want. Son, stand still over Gibeon, and moon in the valley of Aelon. Joshua is fighting. Time is running out, and he wants to make sure he licks these people. What did Joshua say? Sun, stand still. Moon, stand still. The scientist tells us, no. It is the earth that revolves around the sun. My question to you, Mr. NASA, is why did Joshua not say, earth, stand still? Because you're the one who's moving. Joshua said, I want the focus to be on Gibeon. That's what Joshua said. Son, keep that gaze, keep the rays on Gibeon, the city. That's where the people are. Keep the gaze on it. So, as it is the day of reflection, let me ask you. So, the sun stood still. But what if the sun stood still and the earth is still moving at 1,000 miles an hour? How would the ray of the sun be placed on Gibeon? Tell me, Mr. Nasser. Tell me. Tell me, Mr. Nasser, how was it possible that Ezekiah's dial could move backwards in time and not go forward? Tell me. Tell me. 10 degrees backwards. How do you go backwards in time? Tell me. The word says, the time, it was almost a day when the sun stood still. So when you had the time that the sun stood still with Hezekiah's 10-degree dial, it comes to 1 day. 1 day. Who made all this possible? He who is greater than Solomon. So why don't you come to hear him? The queen of Ethiopia will one day look at her own people, people from Africa, people from the Caribbean, people from the Americas, and I suspect also the Europeans and others, and condemn them. Why? Because she heard that truth was in Jerusalem. And she saddled up and took people with her. And when she got there, she took note. She watched the man, how he ate his food. She watched the kind of food he ate. She watched the people, how they responded with respect to him. She looked at the way he walked and conducted himself in the temple of Yah. She took note. She went back and she modeled her empire on this. You didn't hear me. Let me say it again. The Queen of Sheba went back to her own country and made the changes, because at that time they were worshiping sun god. You didn't hear me. Shall I take you back to the Babel where Nimrod started all those foolishness? Nimrod, Cush, Ham, that's your descendants. But the Queen of Sheba, she changed it. So now as we finish, you better come with me to the book of Acts. The book of Acts. And we will go to chapter 8. Chapter 8. And what does the word says? The word in the book of Acts says that, well, let's look at verses 26. Shall we look at that? And the angel of Yah spake to Philip, saying, Arise, and go towards the south, unto the way that goeth down from Jerusalem unto Gaza, which is desert. Perhaps you don't know this, but we're made to understand Gaza was given to the Queen of Sheba by Solomon. It is reputed that. And he arose and went, and behold, a man of Ethiopia. A man from where? Ethiopia. An eunuch of great authority under Candace, Queen Candace of the Ethiopians. This man is the chancellor of the exchequer for the Queen of Ethiopia, and he's in Jerusalem. So you can see the lineage. You could see why Haile Selassie in 1936 found himself in Jerusalem, because he knows his roots. He knew. And that's why when Mussolini told him, you better take down the Ethiopian flag and become a vassal under the Italian rule, Selassie pulled back and said to him, you think that I could cut up my country and give that sugared part to that man and give the other sugared part to that man? He said, I would be unworthy of my ancestors, beginning with Solomon. That's what he said. And so we're reading about the Ethiopian eunuch. You could see the genealogical line. You can see the lineage. You can see it in here. We are reading about our ancestors. And so when we see the Ethiopian eunuch here, and Philip is told to go and address him, this man is rich. This is the 1st century. You didn't hear me. I say that again for your benefit. This was in the 1st century. So when you tell me in the 18th and 19th century that missionaries from Europe brought the gospel to Africa, who are you talking to? This man was reading from the book of Isaiah in the 1st century. Are you with me? Open your eyes, people. And so he's there and he's reading from the book of Isaiah chapter 53, and he sees there, what does he see? He sees that the book is talking about one who is going to be mistreated, and he wants to know, who is this man? And the Holy Spirit, the Ruach, told Philip to go and explain to him, and Philip explained everything to him. And so he asked Philip, what hinderest thou, Philip? Can you not see a pool of water down there? Why don't you baptize me? Because I know who he is. That one who is greater than Solomon, because he's letting you know, he's telling Philip, my ancestor, the Queen of Sheba, went to Jerusalem and met Solomon. That was in BC. So I have now come and I have found the man who is greater than Solomon. That's why he was there. And Philip explained, why did he come? Because he understands Zephaniah chapter 3 and verse 10, that when Messiah comes, Ethiopia must bring him an offering back when he comes. And he went there to find out when the Messiah come. Philip told him he came and he's gone, but he's coming back. That's why in verse 10 he says that Ethiopia will bring him. What will Ethiopia bring him? The Ark of the Covenant that is in Axum. So when you read the Ethiopian eunuch, don't dissemble it. Don't unplug it. Don't bisect it from what happened in 1 Kings chapter 10. The Queen of Sheba went home and modeled Ethiopia under the realm of the king of Israel. That's why our history is bigger than we think. And we have allowed other people to give us effigies of our histories and tell us lies about our history and write us out of our own history. Do you understand? And we are sitting here not understanding that we're reading about our ancestors. You better read the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28, because he said, if you don't believe me, I'm going to do what? I'm going to bring you back to Egypt on ships. You better read Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. And so if you got the word Egypt there means bondage. And he's going to bring you back into bondage. And so my question also would be, which other group of people came to America or Britain on ship other than your own kin? Tell me. Not only come to America and Britain, but came as slaves. Do you know of any? Then why can you not see yourself in scriptures? You also saw in chapter 48 of Genesis, when Jacob, your ancestor, was blessing the sons of Joseph, those two North African boys, what are their names? Ephraim and Manasseh. He says, I put my name on them. What's his name? Israel. Their mother was what? Egyptian, Misraim. So I don't know how you got to the stage where you don't even know who you are. And so I think the greatest theft in all of history is the thieving of our identity. It is interesting now, credit card companies are telling you to secure your card. You know, because of identity theft. When the same people, the ancestors or the descendants of them, are the ones who stole our identity. Isn't it interesting? And you must secure your credit card, but not your eternity. Isn't that sure? So come on, wise up, Caribs. Wise up, our people. And let us talk it from the mountaintop that there is one greater than Solomon, and he's here. In Yeshua's name I pray. Amen.